On the first floor of the Star of Mysore newspaper office, in the small city of Mysore, in the southern Indian state of Karnataka, I find myself in a large hall, divided in two halves, one for the busy finance department and the other lined with shelves of old newspapers. The shelves are labeled by year, and daily newspapers from 1978 are easily retrievable. Is this an archive? Or is it documentation? Is the office a repository? According to the International Council on Archives, archives are records that have been selected for permanent preservation because of their value as long term evidence of an organization's history, actions, and decisions. Archives are also the place where records that have long term value are kept. Archives also have informational and research value. Among the largest archives in South Asia is the National Archives of India. The National Archives are sometimes called the memory of the nation. But what does memory look like in such large and varied archives? Often, archives of the state contain administrative matters. They conjure up images of shelves with dusty files and stacks of paper. One historian of the French judicial archives has written, the archives of the 18th century have little in common with the illuminated medieval manuscripts that preceded them. There's nothing decorative about them. They were simply one of the modes of civil and criminal administration under the monarchy, and time has preserved them as a trace of its passage. Because they're state produced documents, such archives are seen as more important than others. Magazines, pamphlets, and such records were considered ephemera because they were seen as less valuable. With regard to the political nature of archives, special mention may be made to archives in colonies of empire. These colonies and their histories were constructed and interpreted through the relationship of the colonizer to the colonized. In the case of India, some scholars have argued that colonization led to an amnesia or a forgetting of one's own history and heritage. Colonization was often carried out through brutal acts of violence. In the case of South Africa, the famous Truth and Reconciliation Committee relied on questions of evidence, but not in a straightforward way. They intended to wrestle with notions of truth in relation to factual and forensic truth. The committee generated much public debate and became a part of public memory. It challenged the norms by which history has been conventionally written and opened up space for voices that had been marginalized by this history. But let's return to where we are, stacks of newspaper at the Star of Mysore office. Historians have sometimes treated newspapers only as a source of factual information. But as the historian Jerry Knudsen points out, our concern need not be with what actually happened in any given time or place, but also with what people thought was happening, as revealed to them through the means of mass communication, which may have conditioned their subsequent actions. Historian of Indian newspapers Robin Jeffrey begins his study of the newspaper revolution in India by saying that in 1976, if you had divided among India's 755 million people the number of newspapers produced each day, you would have had more than 80 people clustered around each copy. People discovered ways to think about themselves and to participate in politics that would have been unthinkable a generation before. Newspapers are a wonderful archives of the everyday. What do historians mean by the everyday? Is it simply the mundane and the banal, or is there more to the everyday approach to studying history? The history of the everyday emerged as a part of a social history and history from below, trying to understand the struggles as well as the mentalities of ordinary people, their values, and their beliefs. Perhaps that's what the novelist Martha Cooley meant when she wrote, The archivist is the keeper of countless objects of desire. and I'm going to try and learn about Mysoreans' countless desires while reading decades of pages in the Star of Mysore newspaper.